Good morning, and Honourable Minister for Finance and Coordinating the Economy, Chair of Agora, all protocols observed, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here. Um, Let me start by thanking Agora Policy and also the MacArthur Foundation for inviting me to share a few thoughts on this matter. It's always a pleasure to be part of conversations that really matter, and this is obviously one of those conversations. And policy dialogues like this are more than just events. They are spaces where ideas meet, uh, where action starts, where reform begins, and not just in documents, but in dialogue. And they remind us that active citizenship is not a luxury, but it's a necessity for national development. And I come from a very passionate perspective on this. I started my career in public sector reform, and thank you for my excellent introduction. And local government sat at the heart of all of that reform and all of that action. And I remember my first time walking into a group of about 150 local councillors in the UK. And I was a youngish woman at the time, and there were 150 60-year-old men sort of sitting with their arms folded and cynical expressions on their face. And my job was to convince them that they could do better for their communities by changing the way that they were held accountable. And I have to tell you, it was terrifying and it was challenging and it was very satisfying. And we became fast friends in the end. But reform is a tough gig. It's really tough to do. I was part of the vanguard of innovation, if you like, in the 2000s that changed the 200-year-old committee system in the UK to a different model. So we had a committee system of joint committees that often didn't have teeth. They lacked teeth. And what we did was we split out the executive and the scrutiny functions so that it was really clear who was decision making and who was spending and who was being held accountable. And fast forward 20 years, I was working with my teams in Nepal, with the Nepali government to put in place a unique form of federalism in sometimes the most remote part of the Himalayas, that was part of the political settlement after the civil war, after the conflict in Nepal. And we worked with provinces and we worked with local government, ranging from complex tax reform and complex allocations and debt reform to things as simple as sitting mentors alongside women who were taking office for the very first time, who didn't know how to call a meeting or how to write a minute. And all of that matters, and all of that matters because that was all about getting results for those communities. Local governance reform is a deeply political issue here in Nigeria and across the world. And it touches on questions of sovereignty, it touches on questions of legitimacy, and more importantly, it touches on the everyday lives of people. And each country approaches reform differently, shaped by its own history, shaped by its own institutions, and by its own people. And I hear you loudly when you talk about a Nigerian think tank for Nigeria. And so I won't presume to judge Nigeria's path, but I can share a few lessons from our own experience and from our long-standing partnership with Nigerian governments. At its heart, local governance is about how councillors are elected, how revenues are raised and how revenues are spent, and how citizens are involved in those decisions that affect their communities. And they're not abstract issues, they're real, and they matter deeply to people. And international evidence shows that when decentralization is done well, in whatever form, it leads to fairer, more efficient and more resilient public services, from health to education, water and sanitation, infrastructure, all of those important things. And here in Nigeria, we've seen what happens when communities truly own their own projects. We know that the results are stronger and we know that the results are more sustainable. And for over 20 years, the UK has worked alongside Nigerian states and local governments to strengthen planning, budgeting, and service delivery. And we have some experiences that we can share. Through programs like Mobilising for Development and the Partnership to Engage, Reform and Learn, Pearl, many of you will know it as, we've supported Nigerian-led efforts to make the relationship between governments and their citizens more transparent and more open to everyone in their communities. Kaduna State is a great example. Local governments are leading the way. They're developing their own plans and budgets, and they're working with communities to select priority projects through a community development charter. And a small example is Kaduna LGA. They carried out major renovations of a primary school in Masawa. There had been years of dilapidation. There were pupils, school children sitting under leaking roofs. We all know this picture, sitting on bare floors. The community themselves voted to intervene in that school. They led their own consultations. They put it into the local budget in 2023. The renovation works were completed. And they have new chairs, they have new tables, they have teachers, and the teachers are coming in to teach. And that significantly improved conditions. It sounds like a small project, but it makes a big difference if you think about every child that goes through that school over time. Challenges remain. A key challenge is the state joint local government account. That's long been a source of frustration. We understand that and we can see that. And there have been various approaches to that across states, and there's been limited transparency. And we know that the Supreme Court's landmark decision was a major step forward. It clarified the rules around disbursement. But what we know is needed now, and what we are told by LGAs and everyone involved, is that we need a clear, agreed framework for managing those funds. So without this, of course, primary schools don't get funded, people don't get the healthcare they deserve, all the things that make up a productive and rich society. So looking ahead, I'm going to offer 5 lessons from the UK experience with devolution. And as Nigeria charts its path forward, these are the things that we thought about and we found. And they might sound obvious, but I'm going to state them anyway. So number 1 is the clarity of roles between state and local governments, and that's essential. It reduces overlap and it improves service delivery. The second, strategic planning. Strategic planning has to accompany autonomy. Independence without direction risks inefficiency. Citizen engagement, number 3. Citizen engagement builds legitimacy. Councils have to be rooted in the communities that they serve. Number 4, fiscal autonomy is vital, but it must come with strong safeguards for transparency and accountability. And number 5, democratic values matter. So free and fair elections are the foundation of public trust. And these are issues that every single country, including the UK, grapples with. And it's an ongoing grappling. It's not a one-off thing. It's something that we continually have to work on. And then finally, from me, I would just say, get the incentives right. If there's one thing I've learned over my years in this area, getting the incentives to act really, really matters, whether they're political, informal, formal, whichever ones they are. So finally, I will bring my goodwill to a close. Nigeria is undertaking, of course, bold and transformational reforms. Agora policy deserves credit for keeping these issues in the spotlight. It's a tough gig, as I said, and for creating spaces where ideas can be tested, can be talked about, and can be refined. And real change happens when citizens hold their leaders to account. And as a partner and as a friend, the UK, where we are welcome and invited, stands ready to support on that. So I very much look forward to hearing about the recommendations from today's dialogue. You have the UK's full goodwill and full support on this, and I hope you have an excellent day. Thank you.